And happy Thursday, everybody. Welcome back to Thursday Night Live here at AU Club. My name is Nathan King, joined here by Jason Caldwell here from Auburn Undercover to talk all things Auburn today. We'll have a special guest, Auburn men's golf head coach Nick Clinard will join us here in a little bit. Got plenty to talk about, of course, from basketball's big win yesterday. They've got a huge game on Saturday as well. We'll touch on a little football here on the bye week as well. So, Jason, we talked about it last night at Neville Arena, but a huge game for Auburn basketball to get the season open, as Nick has already joined us, so we'll pop over to that interview. But, for them to get off on the right foot, Jason, we talked about them getting tested with a big opponent in game one. It obviously went much better than expected, but things are really going to ramp up for them against a national title contender on Saturday.
Yeah, no, it's about as well as you can play, I think, in an opener when you start talking about the way that Auburn played against Vermont last night. And then, yeah, it's a completely different scenario when you start talking about facing Houston. Talented team, really athletic, physical defense. It's going to be everything last night's game wasn't. Now, your defense will still travel, and when you're Auburn, you give up 43, and heck, I will bet 10 of those were in the last 5 minutes or so. When you can play defense like that, you're going to be successful. Now, the question is, what happens offensively against a team like Houston? Because they're going to extend, they're going to be really physical with your guards. A lot of that depends on how the game's called. Will they be let up? And normally, when it's Houston, they will normally let you play a little more. And so that might work into Auburn's favor as well. But I think Auburn's actually a little deeper than Houston is. Houston doesn't go as much deep. But yeah, hard to find much to fault Auburn's performance last night against Vermont. It was pretty flawless.
Yeah, I mean, it was one that just kind of snowballed. Look, Vermont's a really good team. They're a team that's made 3 straight NCAA tournaments. They are picked in the preseason to go to their 4th straight NCAA tournament. So, I think a lot of people maybe look at, when there's mid-majors and non-conference opponents coming in, sort of brushing it off and going ahead and chalking up a big Auburn win. But this one was different. This is a team that entered number 80 in the country in Ken Pom, and so this could end up being, depending on Vermont's season, this could be a quad 2 win for Auburn at home, maybe a high quad 3. Talking about the big performers for Auburn in that game, 94-43 over Vermont. You mentioned it yesterday. Chad Baker-Mazara kind of got things started for them, had a little mini run by himself early in the game, but Miles Kelly, Jason, I mean, you would have never known this guy missed 2 weeks of practice. A couple weeks ago, the Georgia Tech transfer had 21 points to lead Auburn. All of them were off of 3-pointers. And it was a stretch there in the second half that you don't see all too often of a guy just getting hot, calling for the basketball as soon as it's put into play. He is a guy, I think, that changes that dynamic for this backcourt this season because, look, Auburn fans have rightfully, I think, complained about the lack of length and the lack of backcourt shooting the last few years. Miles Kelly has both of those things, and he showed it in a big way on Wednesday.
Yeah, no, it was straight heat. We've talked about it like that. That's a guy that, when you start talking about the additions for Auburn basketball, the ability to find a guy that can shoot and make shots from the perimeter was probably the one thing that you look at last year and you go, there were stretches at times where they might not have those guys, the ability to go make some shots. And I think something I talked to Mark Murphy last night. He went to the game as a fan and just kind of watched. And he said, look, the difference for this team, and it's one of the big keys in basketball, the difference for this team is now you have enough scores that you might not have a lull of 7 or 8 minutes where if your top 2 guys don't play well, all of a sudden you look up and you hadn't scored in a while. This team's got so many guys that can play. Then I think you start talking about, look, that makes you almost lull-proof at times. And when you have that, you have the ability to stay in games, not have those runs go against you. And, man, in basketball, that's as important as anything you can find.
Yeah, I mean, we knew what Auburn was going to have this season in Janai Broome. It's so rare to have a returning All-American in college basketball, but Bruce Pearl talked about it today. He said Janai was almost happy to have a game right out of the gate. And look, they were obviously a great team last year. He had plenty of help last season, but right out of the gates, Vermont's coach admitted right afterwards they tried to take away Janai Broome. That was one of their game plans. They just hoped Auburn wouldn't shoot the lights out. And this team isn't going to shoot like this every single game. They're not going to have that kind of 3-point shooting performance every single game. It could have stayed in like the low 60s. They kind of fell in love with it down the stretch and just let a bunch of them go. But for a guy like Janai, like you said, having that support around him is going to be really, really important this season. Jason, if you want to talk and kind of bring us in a little bit here, we might get Nick on the show. Talk about Auburn men's golf, what they've got going into this season, and obviously a team that is coming off of a historic year and a year where they rolled Toomers for the national title.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we'll get Nick to slide on in here if we want to a little early, get rolling. But Nathan, you started talking about successful programs and man how different it is, and Nick, we appreciate you hopping in. We got a couple of different mics here, so you can.
Mics still have.
We got one for online and one for us in here. But first, we're out here at AU Club, and this has been home, and it's still home. But it's amazing how different this place is since you first walked in the door, isn't it?
It's incredible. I mean, just the ownership here and what they've done to this club and to this golf course, and just I can't be more thankful to Mike Thompson and Will Herring and Jimmy Green and Murray Neighbors and all the guys that own this club, and it's just a privilege to be here and a privilege to play here all the time.
Yeah, just for you, I guess let's go back first. We've had you on since then, but what's life been like since you walk off a course as a national champion? It has to change things a little bit, doesn't it?
It does a little bit. It's still busy. I mean, you still got your nose to the grind, and you're recruiting like nonstop, and I think you're just dealing with a lot more distractions, to be honest. I mean, just more people want you to speak here and speak there, and I think you got to learn to be good at saying no, and I'm not the greatest at that. So I got a really busy schedule the next 10 to 12 days of speaking engagements and things of that nature. But once that's over, I'll have a little bit of break because I haven't had a break since January.
Yeah, you hear often it's harder to stay there than it is to get there. Now, it's hard to get there, too, in this sport because one bad day, I mean, a lot of sports you go, hey, man, you can have an off day and you're still fine. One bad day on the golf course can end everything. How different is it when you're the guy that has the target? And Auburn's had a target for a while, but you haven't had the ultimate target of being a national champ.
Yeah, you're right. It's the ultimate target now, but it's different in regards of how you just got to make sure the mindset of the players, right? You got to make sure that, hey, you got to flip the script. It's a new year, it's a new team. We're going to have a target on our back, but we're not defending anything.
Correct.
I mean, that's in the past, and we got to go earn it, and we got to play high-level golf. And if we do that, then we're going to be in good shape. I like our guys. I like our team. And I think if we stay healthy, that's going to be key number one. And number two is can we get lucky and play well at the right time of year?
Yeah, I mean, the fall is kind of setting the table time for you guys, and always a difficult challenge. But kind of a building through the fall and obviously finish up on a high note. That had to feel good to walk out of there. And that's kind of a mini setup for what you would face in a national championship, isn't it?
It is. I mean, you're going one with elite golf course,
yes.
Right? The East Lake's fabulous.
Yeah.
And you play stroke play.
Yep.
And you play match play, which is the ultimate team game. And they came out victorious. I thought we played well all week. We kind of ham and egged it a little bit, where all five guys really contributed. I think it's a matter of, if you look at our fall season, we're ranked third in the country in every major poll, and not to say that's disappointing, but I feel like we are the best team in the country if we play the way we're capable of playing, and we just need all five guys to gel and compete at the right, people compete well at the right time, and I feel like we'll get that in spring.
Yeah, it's another good mix because we talk about it, and heck, me and you talk about it on the sidelines before football games, whenever we see each other. There's no secret in any sport. It's talent and getting guys there. You've got some competition because of talent, and it looks like it's pushed guys. I mean, Eshelman may be the story of the fall for you guys, and a guy that wasn't on the course for the NCAA champ. Older guy, but he's been pushed by some young guys, and he's responded. I mean, that's kind of the nature of what you want, isn't it?
It is. I mean, obviously, you don't win games. You don't have talent. You got to roll out guys. You got to have some dudes. That's what I call it.
Yes.
You call it that too, right? You got to have dudes, and we have those dudes on our roster, and we have depth, and we have competition internally. And Ryan Eshelman played great. He played great at East Lake Cup. I think great players, when they're given the opportunity, they seize the moment. And he was able to do that. And hopefully that springboards him into a great offseason and coming back ready to compete and play in January. But I like our guys. And we got 4 guys returning from last year's championship team. And we have the number one freshman in the country at high school, Billy Davis, coming in. And he can flat out play. And he's very mature for his age.
Yeah.
And when we have other guys that are knocking on the door, and Caden Pope's a great player. He's a guy that's kind of coming into his own, trying to figure out who he is. And I look forward to him really trying to help.
Yeah, just talk about the value of a guy like Carson, who's played so much golf. He's not a name that you hear with PGA Tour U and all these things, but all he does is just go out and compete. he's probably the ultimate grinder for you guys and the heart and soul guy. But how valuable is a guy like that because he's played so much golf?
Well, he's huge. I mean, he's valuable off the golf course too.
Yeah.
In the locker room.
Yeah.
You know, when he speaks, he's just such a great student athlete. He's like a 3.5 student in finance, and he's a top 40 player in the world and world amateur rankings, and he is a grinder. You know, his work ethic is through the roof. He just got engaged. You know, he's the kind of guy that, you know, you want your daughter to marry.
Yeah.
And I can't say enough good things about him. But his work ethic's through the roof. And when like I said, he's a leader. He's one of our captains, and he speaks. The guys listen.
Yeah, you talk about from the talent standpoint, your two freshmen that played so well down the stretch last year. What's the learning process? Because you come in and the freshman, it's almost like you don't know what you don't know, and then you get a taste of it, and then you go into year two and you go, what's the next step for them? Because the talent level is there. What's the next step? Is it about, hey, maybe approach, learning about, you know, how to deliver in different? How do you go from year one to year two?
Well, first off, they're still just turned 19.
Yes.
You know, Jackson turned 19 in May, and Josiah's 19 as well. And I think a lot of it just comes down to being humble, you know, and realize that you got to keep getting better, you got to keep improving, you got to keep competing. And there's areas of your game that need improvement. And there are some holes in your game that could be a little bit better. Because we always approach it like, you know, you want to play on the PGA Tour, or do you want to compete for championships on the PGA Tour? Do you want to win tournaments? Do you want to play in the Masters and the U.S. Open and British Open and have a chance with 9 holes to play to actually win the golf tournament?
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the areas that Coach Alexander and Coach Williams and myself believe that you can really continue to enhance during your college experience. So when you're ready, when you get out there, you're ready. You're ready to compete, and they're still learning. Like you said, they come in as freshmen, they don't really know what they don't know.
Yeah.
But I think they're constantly learning, and a lot of it's just keeping them humble and making sure they understand that everything in life is earned, it's not given.
We got to, before we keep going on this, you mentioned two guys that are really important, Chris Williams, Buddy Alexander. Those two guys, this coaching staff, you got different personalities, different pieces. Hey, you got veteran, young, in between. But it feels like a really good mix, and it's worked out really well so far, hasn't it?
It is. You know, I think Chris Williams has been just a blessing for me. You know, we're opposite as far as personalities, but we mesh well together. You know, he's definitely, you know, West Coast, laid back, super chill. And I'm just like type A, just work 20 hours a day, and that's just what I do. And you know, and then obviously you got Coach Alexander coming in, and just his wisdom, his experience. He's a lot like me in a lot of ways, and a lot unlike me in a lot of ways too. And he's been just a good sounding board for a lot of different things when it comes to the team, when it comes to recruiting and building the roster. I think that's really important. Taking the roster that you have and how you're going to continue to build that culture, but it's been just like you said, it's been a very eclectic group, but we work very, very well together.
We talk about this in terms of football and basketball, where getting guys to the next level, how valuable that is when you start to talk to guys, and you look now and you got some of these young guys starting to make a little noise. Obviously, you got Patton Kensire and guys that have been there, but you got Trace Crow starting to kind of jump out there. You got some other guys that are making their way up. How valuable is that for the next round of guys when you start talking about recruiting? Because golf's not. It's like every sport. Every sport you want to go and compete at the highest level, and you want to do that. Golf's the same as football and basketball. That has to be a big selling point to go, look, we're getting guys there, and we're going to have even more.
Yeah, I mean, you go back and look at, you know, obviously you got Patton and you got Blaine Barber and Dominic Gazzelli and all those guys that played on tour for a number of years, and Will Claxton and Jason Duffner. And looking at the young guys, you know, Andrew Kozan and Michael Johnson and Jacob Solomon, and look at Trace Crow had a good day today on the PGA Tour, and just seeing what Jackson's doing, what Josiah's doing, and what Brendan Valdez is doing on PGA Tour U, and those are going to be the next generation of tour players that played at Auburn, and we can't be more excited, but we also want to make sure they understand, because you know, obviously Coach Alexander played, and he won the U.S. Amateur,
correct.
You know, and Chris Williams was the number one player in the world for over a year and a 4-time All-American and played in major championships. And so we have a lot of value as coaches that really help them understand what they're getting ready to walk into as a professional and how to prepare for that. Not just the golf, but the lifestyle.
Yeah.
And that's a lot. You know, the lifestyle is not for everybody.
No, it
drives some people out of the game because of that.
Yeah, it's a difficult. in comparison, when people talk about, Major League Baseball, and you go, well, being in the major leagues is great. And if you're one of the guys who's the top 25 player in the world, it's a different lifestyle than it is for a guy. When you're trying to keep your card every year or you're trying to get your card, that's a much different scenario. Because I remember talking to Jason Duffner before he gets his first win, and he's like, man, it's a grind. It is a grind. And that's what Trace Crow's going through. That's what these guys are going through now. But you've got Duffner that lives here, and you've got Blaine Barber that lives here. Having those guys to be kind of a mentor has to be a big deal too, isn't it?
It's huge. For those guys to lean on those guys, to talk to them, to learn, and it's invaluable. For what they can learn from those guys about getting ready to get out there on tour and compete. And it's only going to get harder. 2026, they're going to the top 100 to keep their card.
I know.
Not the 125. So it's going to get harder and harder. And like you said, I mean, they turn on social media and they see Rory McIlroy flying around in private jets, but that's not what everybody's doing.
No.
They're lugging their whole families through the Atlanta airport trying to catch a Delta flight. So, the lifestyle is not for everybody, but we try to educate them on what they're going, what they're getting ready to get into, so they're mentally and emotionally ready for that too. And that's a big part of it.
Yeah. You talked a little bit about recruiting. Kind of explain a little bit to people how much different golf recruiting is for you when you're talking about recruiting probably a handful of really elite guys each year, hoping you get that. It's not football where you got 75, 100 guys that you're focusing on. This is a more select group probably from year to year, and that means probably more specific travel trying to go watch guys.
I mean, so we start out with more of a funnel approach of maybe 15 to 20 guys that we're evaluating, not really recruiting, we're evaluating them, and then once we kind of determine, hey, here's a 4 or 5 or 3 or 6 or whatever that number is for that year, that we're going to go out and really recruit. I would say that it's we're going to certain tournaments just to see one guy. Like going to a high school football game to watch one player.
Yeah, which we do. We do that.
Which you do, right? I always say when you're recruiting the top 3 or 4 or 5 players in the country, the 5-star kids, even in golf, like it's as crazy as everything else you read about.
Yeah.
There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of people involved.
Well, especially, nowadays,
it changes
because
every week.
NIL's in golf just like it is every other sport.
We've had kids we thought we were going to get on Friday at 5 o'clock, and then Saturday at 2 o'clock, it's totally flipped the other way.
Yeah.
And not for things to talk about, but it's true and it's reality. But it's just crazy out there. But listen. I've always believed that the right people come, and we want people that want to be at Auburn. We want people that love Auburn, and if you do that, Auburn's going to love you back.
Yeah, no question. Before we let you go, just kind of spring forward to the spring for you guys, and talk a little about kind of the setup as you head into SEC championships, and then get another regional opportunity here at home, which has to be a whole lot of fun.
Which is great. I'd say one, just stay healthy. That's the first thing, and then we get kicked off. We start class back on January 13th, and we go to Hawaii on February 1st. So not a bad trip. Get to go to the Big Island for 8 days.
Yeah, I can hop on luggage maybe. I don't know. We'll see. So.
We'll put you back in the toilet.
Yeah, I'll take it. I don't know. You'd have to knock me out if I want to make that flight across. So.
It's a long ways from Atlanta to Honolulu, but we go there. Then we go to Las Vegas. We do a couple individual tournaments too, where we take some guys that play up at NC State and at Georgia Southern, and then we're in Las Vegas. We're in Myrtle Beach. We're down in Stuart, Florida, down in the Jupiter area. We're at Vanderbilt's tournament up in Nashville in April, and then we're at the Ford in Savannah in April as well, as we head into the SEC championship at Seattle.
Yeah.
And then having regionals here. I mean, we got the phone call that, hey, would you be interested in hosting regionals?
Heck yeah!
It was a pretty quick yes. It didn't take a lot of thought, but to have it at the AU Club, and just really gracious to the owners for giving us the opportunity to have it here. And it's definitely a home course advantage, and the course will be in great shape come May, and we're looking forward to it.
Yeah, I know you have certain places you like to play, but how has your schedule makeup maybe changed a little bit? Has it opened a door or two for things that maybe that create a little bit different competition? Has that changed a little bit over the past few years?
Well, I like to play places we win.
Yeah, that does help.
It does help.
Well, there's nothing better than confidence, right?
Yeah, of course. I mean, and we played the national championship at La Costa in Southern California, so we're constantly looking at schedule based on what's the golf course like. Is it a really good test?
Similarity, maybe.
Similar grasses.
Yeah.
Environment, wind directions. We're looking at the competition ultimately too. What's the field like? Our guys want to compete against the best. They want to play against the best teams and the best coaches and the best players, and we give them that opportunity. We're probably playing the number 1 schedule in the country right now. Yeah,
well, we appreciate you hopping in, and you're the best. You're always so good to us. We we enjoy having you on, and we'll be out here maybe hitting some balls here soon ourselves as we
Thank you.
try to get going. So thanks, Nick. We appreciate it, man. Thank you. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Nick Clinard joining us there, and we appreciate him hopping in always, being so gracious to us as the Tigers get ready for the spring schedule and get ready to roll. And Nathan, you look at it, and Nick talked about it. There's nothing more important in any sport than talent. That team has it, and we saw it last night for Auburn basketball. And honestly, you look at it, and I don't know that it's 10 NBA guys when you look at Auburn's roster, but I look at a bunch of guys that can just play, and we saw depth, and we can get back to that. But honestly, probably since the summer, the guy that I've pointed to, and you've talked a lot, Chaney Johnson has been the guy that I thought had to be good for this team to take that step to be elite.
Yep.
The glimpses we've gotten of Chaney Johnson so far are that he's taken a massive step since last year.
Well, Chaney Johnson's been really good in their 2 exhibition. He was really good in their 2 exhibition games, and then goes out there last night, doesn't start again. And from talking to Bruce Pearl today, I maybe get the feeling, Jason, they're actually going to stick with that double big because of what Houston does. Houston runs very little small ball. They've got 2 dudes made of concrete on the inside. The problem is that you wonder about is the foul trouble.
Correct.
You've got both your centers on the floor. We'll get to that later, but Chaney Johnson goes 6 of 8 in the season opener. 13 points for him. No turnovers, 9 rebounds. Talking to him today, Damon Davis, this guy's been in Auburn a long time, done a phenomenal job. He gave Chaney Johnson 3 goals in this offseason. So gain about 20 to 25 pounds. Obviously, that's muscle. Get a little faster, get up and down the floor, and just the big thing I think people forget about too, Jason, is Chaney just said he's like, yeah, get rid of some nagging ankle and knee stuff. Like players just have this stuff all the time, and nobody really knows about it. Like, they've got dings and bruises. Chaney's healthy. He's one of the most athletic players on the team, and he's somebody that they've been very high on since the offseason. Really interested to see what kind of role he takes this year, even if he's a guy coming off the bench for them. But I get the feeling, in more games than not, he'll be their starter at the 4 this season.
You know what's interesting to me watching him play is that this is a guy that was a guard in high school. Janai Broom was a guard in high school. And you look at the guys that have the most ball skills, and we saw it. I think that's a big part of things for Chaney. I think the other part is that you can tell Chaney Johnson spent time playing behind Jalen Williams last year. Chaney Johnson has developed post moves, whether it was a fadeaway, we saw a little kind of baby hook off the glass. Those are the types of plays that you have to be able to make. I mean, even Janai Broom, you look and you go, that guy's 6'11", he's a good player, but you just can't turn around and dunk on everybody all night long. You've got to be able to play, and you got to be physical, but you got to be able to make shots. And I thought Chaney did a good job of that, has done a good job of that. Really impressed with him. And then I think backcourt, the lack of turnovers, and that's not a pressure defense you faced last night, but I do think the combination you've got of having 3 different guys that can play the point guard and all a little bit different, I think that's pretty unique and gives Auburn maybe an advantage going into games.
Yeah, you mentioned talent earlier. I mean, the highest rated recruit on this team, Tahad Pettiford, didn't score, went 0-4 from the field and fouled out. So I think you've got such a deep lineup, and obviously you're going to face stiffer tests than Vermont, but similar to the train of thought that you can have a different guy go off every night. You can also have a different guy just kind of not have it, and you'll probably end up being fine.
You had him and Dylan Cardwell both. Those guys did not score last night, and you win by 51.
Yep.
Now, Dylan's not a guy that you would expect to score a bunch anyway, but you look at it and go, hey, you did that especially without Tahad. You think that's a guy that probably you're going to try to get 10 to 12 points out of, maybe something like that. He didn't score. J.J. Pegues, has 8 points, not a ton from him, but Ja'Kai Howard was 7 off the bench. That's the thing. You've got guys that can give you 7, 8, 9, and consistently play different styles. I just like the makeup of this team so far.
Yeah.
They're going to run into some issues when you play a schedule like they're playing. You're going to have a game, and it may be Saturday night where you go, whew, that doesn't look pretty, because teams are going to try to take away something. And if you're big, they can go, okay, well, we're going to play you straight up and try to take away the guards a little bit more, which I think is what Houston will do.
Yeah, Bruce Pearl talked about it today, this Houston matchup being pretty point guard predicated for them. They lost Jamal Shedd, who's one of the best players in the country. The name escapes me. They bring in an Oklahoma transfer who's very highly rated. It brings us to talk about J.P. Pegues a little bit. That point guard conversation for Auburn is ongoing, and I'm with you that I think Tahad Pettiford is somebody they're going to rely upon for most of this season. He just didn't have a good game off the bat. J.P. Pegues in the opener against Vermont, 8 points, 3 of 3 from the floor. He's shown good three-point shooting in these exhibitions so far, and now in the season opener, 2 of 2 from beyond the arc. He had the best offensive rating on the team, which means the most amount of points produced when he was on the floor. He was projected to be 218. Obviously, that's really inflated and made up in a game that you win by 51.
Yeah.
It provided another layer. I think what I've seen from JP so far, and I think people kind of had their concerns in the preseason of how much he could run with this system. But I think it's something you've got to realize, and you know this, Jason. I mean, look at Auburn's transfer guys last year: Denver Jones, Chad Baker-Mazzara, and Chaney Johnson. They were not playing their best basketball in November and December. They were playing their best basketball in February. I think it takes a little bit of time to adjust on this level. But I mean, we'll see how JP Pegues does. His ability to limit turnovers is going to be key in this game.
Yeah, and you look at something else about those guys. Now they're all second-year guys. It just makes a difference having a second year a lot of times. And I think you see those guys settling in, being what they are a little bit more. Pegues has so much playing time in his background that I think he's probably a guy that will be able to settle in. I don't know that he has this monster year, and I don't think that's his personality. But I think the key is the second-year guys. We saw Janai Broome. We've seen it with guys that have that extra year, how valuable that is in year 2, because you're now – you don't have to worry about learning what you're doing. Now you can turn it loose.
Yep.
You've also had a year in the weight room. We just talked about it with Chaney Johnson. I think that second-year guys, those are the guys I point to. Chad Baker-Mazzara is never going to be, confused with LeBron James with physique. He's a little bigger, but I think just for him, you add 10 pounds, it might not show up, but it may show up in February and March when you're talking about dealing with those bumps and bruises a little bit.
I mean, I remember a piece from the offseason by Isaac Trotter on the 24/7 network about guys who can make that second-year jump, and the guy he pointed to was Janai Broome last year. But that is sort of a trend in college basketball, is that your second season in the program, sometimes you don't always see it from a true freshman, from a freshman, sometimes especially when they're like a 5-star and they come in, they're great right away. But Denver Jones is another one that he had a very quiet 16. I kind of looked down, I was like, well, he had 16 points.
Correct.
He's another guy that, I mean, man, you look at how he played at the end of last season. He was shooting like 54% in the month of March. Another guy that could take a step forward for them this year.
Yeah, and I think that those guys, when you start talking about that, I mean, it just talks about the depth of this team, because we're talking about guys in addition to a guy that you have as an All-American in Janai Broome, and a guy that can make those plays. And so I think when you start talking about it, I think this is a big deal when you have those second-year guys. You have some more experience, and you have guys that can make those plays. And so I liken it to when you start thinking about the teams that have made runs the last few years, and it is those guys that have a little bit more experience in their own program, even when they're transfers. So, just looking forward to seeing this group. And you're right. This is a Houston team that has some new faces, but LJ Cryer is a really experienced player that was at Baylor a couple years ago. They've got others there that can make plays, and they don't have a ton of 6'11", 7-foot guys.
Big.
No, but you look at the weight, and they're all big. They're all built like power forwards. Even they're shooting guards. I mean, they're big, thick guys. That'll be the challenge.
Yeah, I mean, Emmanuel Sharp is somebody that is regarded as one of the better players in the country. You mentioned LJ Cryer. Jawad Roberts is the one that Bruce Pearl pointed to at the 4 today, saying about the 4 matchup. To your point, 6'7".
Yeah,
it's not necessarily a guy who towers above you. They only have one player on the roster who's a freshman that is above 6'8". He's not even projected to be in the lineup.
Yes, no.
We saw that a couple years ago in Birmingham. So this Houston team, as we'll kind of move to previewing Saturday's game. By the way, Auburn number 11, Houston number 4 in the AP poll, but Ken Palm, Houston number 1, Auburn number 2. I mean, these are two titans right now, and it is going to be a massive test for Auburn. But as Bruce Pearl said today, they're expecting a few thousand fans there. I mean, it will be a game that is in Houston, but considering the bye week, there's going to be a good Auburn.
Well, there's 2 things going for it. First, Houston area has a really big Auburn club. So there's a lot of Auburn fans in
Yeah,
Houston to
that's a good
begin
point.
with. The second part of it is that I know, because there's a few folks that I go to church with who are going to Houston because it's cheaper for them to do that than it is to get a ticket at home. They're going to Houston, getting in a hotel, doing all those things because they can go get tickets there and they can't get them here. So there's going to be fans that there you go. And as we talk, there's a pregame tailgate with the Houston Auburn Club. It's a big group. I would expect there to be a couple of thousand Auburn fans in Houston Saturday night. I think it's going to be a good crowd.
Yeah, Jason mentioned the experience. I think Auburn fans, if you were in the game, if you were at the game in Birmingham a couple years ago when they played them in the tournament, or if you watched it, that's the style of Kelvin Sampson's teams. They don't change through the years, and even when they moved from the American to the Big 12, their first year they won the conference and won like 32 games.
It is beat you to death style.
It is, and he's one of the most impressive coaches in the country. I think Auburn would be well served, and they have done this in the last few years. Their style is almost, they kind of want to be what Houston is. Play tenacious defense throughout the entire game. I don't guess that Houston's recruiting, I haven't necessarily looked, I don't think they're recruiting on the level of a Duke or a Kentucky, but they're probably recruiting on the level of Auburn, where you get a bunch of, a handful of really good players every single year. Jason mentioned the experience. I mean, this is their primary lineup as you go through it. Senior, junior, senior, junior, junior, senior, senior. I mean, that is the main group for Houston. Defense is where it's really going to be predicated for them on Saturday. Jason, I mean, I think the biggest thing that I was looking at, one of the biggest things on offense is, as well as they shot the ball from long range, you mentioned Chaney Johnson working inside. They kind of got things rolling with Broom a little bit better. You can't fall in love, and I know Auburn knows this, they can't fall in love with the three like they did. Jackson State shot 4 of 23 from beyond the arc against Houston.
Yeah.
It's going to look more like that than what it did.
I thought last night, once you started seeing them fall and you're up by 45, you just kind of start getting out of your mind a little bit and start shooting a bunch of threes. Now you've got a size advantage, and Janai Broom should be a guy. The question for me is, can he finish? Can you finish around the rim and not have to shoot 25 free throws?
Yep.
Maybe you shoot 13 free throws because you've made 8 of those. Because there are going to be opportunities. And Houston is. I don't expect them to double a ton. They normally going to go play straight up, and because they want to pressure the perimeter. That's what they do a lot of. So I think this is a huge opportunity for Janai Broom when you start talking about potential for this game. But you don't need to go shoot 35 threes against Houston. That's probably not going to end up well.
Well, I mean, if you shoot like you did last night against Vermont, I mean, you're going to beat pretty much anybody in the country. And so Auburn obviously can't rely on that. They know that, but that's just sort of been the style of this Bruce Pearl team, to get up and down the floor and be able to do that, particularly when they're on their home floor. I thought it was interesting, Jason, and we'll kind of close out the basketball discussion here. This is obviously one of the best, if not the best, non-conference schedule in the country, but it's interesting how they prepared for this season, because so much focus was on Vermont. They knew they could get beaten by Vermont. They knew Vermont was an NCAA tournament team. Bruce said throughout the preseason they spent 2 to 3 days on every single high-level non-conference opponent. That included Houston. He mentioned that they prepped for UNC, who they might not even see. They might not even see them at Maui. But it is going to be a quick turnaround for them. They had today to practice, probably do some light stuff tomorrow, and then they're on their way. Houston played on Monday, and they've got the entire week. And so this is going to be a little bit of a simulation of what it'll be like in the postseason. But, Jason, this will be our first glance at Houston, Duke. Ohio State will be a good game, Purdue, and then you get into the SEC slate of like a 9-bid league. This will be the beginning of fans. I think they already know this, but Auburn might drop some games this season, and they might drop some games by 15 or 20 points when they're away from home. This is more like the old Big 12 of the last few years, where you've got good teams every single weekend. But Jason, they'll get an early test here and an early look at how much they can compete against a team that is absolutely one of the favorites to be in the national championship.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you start looking at this heading into a weekend where you start to get some games of consequence really early in a basketball season. Tennessee, Louisville's been pretty terrible lately, but that's a game Saturday where you go, all right, let's see what Tennessee does in response to them. But you look and Baylor, Arkansas is a big basketball game Saturday, and even though Baylor just got run out of the gym on the road to Gonzaga, they don't have a ton of experience right now, but they're talented. Obviously, the Auburn-Houston game is big, but Tuesday night you look at Tuesday night and you start running down. Michigan State, Kansas is next Tuesday night, and then Duke, Kentucky is next Tuesday night. We're going to get in this first week. You're going to get a chance to maybe see some early thoughts on teams that you might expect to be Final Four teams potentially running up against each other and see what you look like. So it's an opportunity. In the end, in college basketball, we saw it last year with Alabama. You can lose several of these games. Alabama lost almost all of them, and it didn't really end up impacting them at all. Seed time down to the stretch.
Yeah.
I mean, now if you win all of them, it impacts you seed-wise because you'll be a 1 seed if you win them all. If you go and win your share of these, win a few of them, but you play teams like this, you're going to be better at the end of the year, and it's going to show up for you because teams are, and the selection committee will go, man, that team's got a few losses, but man, look at the schedule they played, and it's not going to hurt you.
Yeah, Bruce Pearl and the staff, I mean, they haven't been blind to that the last few years. They know that, and sometimes you can't always plan for what your non-conference teams are going to do, but the last couple years it hasn't been as strong as they would have liked, and so he knew they had to go out this season and schedule more like Alabama did last year, and more like some of the contenders do in college basketball. It's you hate to say it's only a win-win type of game because Auburn obviously wants to go and win this game, but you go and you lose to Houston, and as Bruce said today, as long as they are doing the right things and progressing the right way, at the end of the day, it's not going to hurt your resume that much. So really big litmus test. It'll be a late night on Saturday. I know it's the bye week for football, so I know you guys don't have other watching plans for Auburn, but 8:30 on ESPNU. I said 8 o'clock last night. It's even late.
It's going to be a late game.
And I believe you said Baylor, Arkansas, right? I believe they're before, and so they have to wait until that game is over.
That's the lead in, and then you have all the football games on Saturday as well. So it's going to be a wall-to-wall day, and Auburn not playing football, but it's going to be a big football day for people who are. I mean, obviously, everybody, you're still paying attention to football, and you look at it, and there's some really interesting games when you start talking about, kind of this Saturday of college football. And in Florida, even Florida, Texas early on is an interesting game. But the Ole Miss Georgia game, Georgia going to Ole Miss, is huge. Alabama LSU, 2 really big games. When you start talking about nationally, those are about as big as it gets when you start talking about this league. But I mean, South Carolina Vandy is a really interesting game based on what we've seen the last few weeks. The Mississippi State, Tennessee is really interesting, but the other one is Oklahoma, Missouri. Missouri just hasn't played well. Who knows what happens at the quarterback position? I haven't really looked to see if he's ready to go again. But if he doesn't play at quarterback, then I think Oklahoma's got a chance to go win that. But some real intriguing games as this thing starts to wind down towards what I think is going to be a whole lot of chaos at the end of the year.
Yeah, we got on Tuesday, as I'm sure everyone was watching on Tuesday night, you got the college football playoff selection show, and so it's starting to get a little bit clearer what that's going to look like. Look, Miami goes on the road to Georgia Tech. Like, that's not a team you can push around. Miami has been flirting with disaster over the last 2 weeks. Now they pull out of it and they win by like 4 touchdowns. But teams have been able to keep it close with them for a little while. You mentioned in the league, Ole Miss showed against Arkansas what they're capable of doing. They've not been overly consistent this season. Georgia's not been very consistent this season either, and Carson Beck has not been anywhere near as precise as people thought he would be.
We were talking about this. I was talking about it with Christian today. If you would ask anybody the numbers, I don't know if people realize Carson Beck's thrown 11 interceptions in those last 5 games. That includes a game with no interceptions. So he's had 3 games of 3 and another game with 2 interceptions. Well, they're 4-1 in that stretch. It speaks to what talent does, because talent can overcome mistakes. Auburn hasn't turned it over a whole lot. They haven't, but a false start, a holding call, that's about as punishing now for Auburn as a turnover is for Georgia. Because so you've seen those little mistakes for Auburn be just as valuable as the huge mistakes for other teams, because the margin for error is not there. Georgia got a lot of margin for error. I wouldn't suggest throwing 3 more interceptions if I was Carson Beck, but it shows you the difference in makeup of a roster when you can overcome mistakes, and they've been able to do it. But I think Jackson Dart just had a just absolutely ridiculous game at Arkansas. I don't think you do that against Georgia, but I don't know that Georgia runs the ball well enough to go over there and just run away from them either.
Yeah, and for Auburn, I know we haven't talked a lot of football and talked any football so far, on this show, the focus is on basketball this week, getting their season started, and with one of their biggest games of the entire regular season on Saturday. But it is the second bye week for this team. It feels like it's been an eternity since they lost to Vanderbilt on Saturday. Jason, I asked Hugh Freeze yesterday on the teleconference whether they could make a change at quarterback. Not wondering, it's time to bench Peyton Thorne, but as Freeze pointed out, and kind of went the way I sort of expected him to talk about it. Peyton's a guy that he said hasn't necessarily done that much wrong or that much that's debilitating, but you start to think big picture.
Yeah.
And that's the first time he has said what we've been talking about potentially being the path for them. At the end of the year, they're probably not going to a bowl game unless they pull off something really spectacular.
You got to run the table here.
Spectacular here at the end. We got a whole week to talk about ULM next week, and obviously there's plenty of things for this team to fix on offense in the bye week. But the quarterback position, I personally would not be surprised if more than just Peyton Thorne, even when it's not mop-up duty, plays next Saturday against ULM, because at this point you've kind of got to see what you got with the other guys.
And the other part of it is that, Peyton Thorne hasn't played bad. He's actually not turned the ball over. I mean,
right.
He's 6 touchdowns, 2 interceptions in his last 5 games, and like 64%, somewhere around in there. That you're looking, and he's top half of the league in pass efficiency rating. So he has played okay, especially since that couple of game stretch. He's played solid football, but it hasn't materialized into any points.
Sure, that's a free say. So we're not.
And
winning.
so you look at it and you go, okay, and often at quarterback especially, you go, hey, Hank Brown has an opportunity, doesn't go well. Now you go, okay, take a deep breath. What do we need to fix to make sure those things don't happen again? Well, you don't know how it is until you get back out there again, because in football you don't scrimmage again. You don't scrimmage in the fall. You don't have these opportunities. The next opportunity Hank Brown has to get over those situations is going to be the next opportunity he plays in a game, unless it's in the spring. And so, I wouldn't be surprised. But do I think Hank Brown will start? I'm not ruling it out. I won't be surprised if we see multiple guys, whether it's Hank Brown and Peyton Thorne, whether it's Hank Brown and somebody else and no Peyton Thorne. Nothing right now is off the table for me because of that. I think it's a good time to go, what do we have going into next season? But you're not doing it at the expense where it feels like you're punting on this year.
I think that's a perfect way to put it. And because you set several weeks ago, I would not have even entertained this idea because I thought it sort of set a dangerous precedent of, Peyton Thorne's not really doing that much wrong. We need to just focus on the future. All right, and this is an extreme example. All right, Jarquez, you're not going to be here next year. It's like you don't necessarily want to do that, but now that you're at a point where, and especially with the next game, if you're playing an SEC team, but you feel like Peyton Thorne gives you the best chance to win. But you're right. I don't think it's punting on Peyton and what he's done this year to say you want to see.
Especially because we've already heard Hugh Freeze talk about, hey, let's get T.J. Lindsey and D.J. Reed ready to go, DeAndre Carter ready to go. I think if you have opportunities to get those guys in, and it's not a drastic difference in what you're doing already, then I think you can. Okay, here we are. We're not giving up on the year. There's not a whole lot of difference here, but this is a guy that we feel like can give us maybe a spark down the stretch, and I think that's where you start a quarterback.
Well, like you said, it's important that some of these positions you were just talking about. I mean, those are guys who have given themselves an opportunity. A guy like DeAndre Carter. It's not like we're talking about guys who haven't done anything at practice, who haven't checked into a game at all, where you're just pulling from the bottom.
That's it. You're like, this is not an audition.
Right.
These are not auditions, but what they are is a quarterback. It's not so much as an audition. It's okay. What do you have, and to make sure. All right, we got to know exactly what we have going into next year. So it's not an audition as much as it is an opportunity for them to go. Okay, let's see if you can be a guy that can make a push and to be the guy. Because we talked about it way back at Arkansas. If Hank Brown comes out, plays really well, and you go, man, that guy lights it on fire the rest of the season, it might change your thought process on what you're doing. But you don't know that now until you go try it. And, I wouldn't be surprised to see them not only just quarterback, but maybe some different spots. Take a look at some guys.
I mean, and you're still trying to win games this season.
Correct.
I mean, this is not a 2012-esque blow the whole thing up at the beginning of November just because they're trying to look at some opportunities to things next season. I mean, if somebody comes out and plays really well at quarterback, like you said, Peyton Thorne has been okay, but there hasn't been that dynamic element of finishing drives. He's made some crucial mistakes. I mean, if Hank, let's just make an example. Somebody like Hank Brown comes in and plays well. you could play them against Texas A&M.
Correct.
If you feel like it gives you a chance to win this game.
At home, you'd have some opportunities. Obviously, it'd be a different scenario, playing a team like that, but you'd have a game to get ready for it. The other part of it is that we talked about it a little bit this week. If you're Hugh Freeze and you're Derek Nix and you're Ken Austin, those guys, you go do what you do. I think getting some tempo back, they've kind of protected the defense, and it's helped. I think they've slowed the game down right now. I think you need to get back to trying to create some explosive plays. They haven't had many of those lately. Auburn's still third nationally in passing plays of 40 or more yards. 18. Nobody would ever believe that stat.
No.
But Auburn's third nationally in passing plays of more than 40 yards, but it's been a while since you've had multiple of those in a game. I think, obviously, you got to run the ball, but I think creating some of those plays would be really huge, especially at quarterback.
Of course, we'll have lots of football talk on the show next week and moving past this weekend as Auburn gets back ready to resume its season at 3-6 against ULM next Saturday. Jason, we've hit our 6:45 marker here at AU Club. Of course, always great to be.
Absolutely.
We took a digital episode last week for Halloween, but great to be back. And I don't mind I'm the one who puts the Christmas tree up early. I don't know.
We have some Christmas decorations here. It's much better than Halloween, so I'll take that. It's take the Christmas decorations all day long. But yeah, looking forward to this week. Obviously, a busy weekend for folks, and come out and check out AU Club if you haven't. Get out here and see what they have to offer. There's a ton of things going on. Obviously, big basketball game coming up this weekend. The opening night tonight, actually, of AHSAA high school football playoffs. There's some teams that move games up because of potential weather. So, looking to see how those recruits and commitments, handle and fare in that week one, and then get ready to roll for ULM next week.
8:30 p.m. on Saturday, Auburn at Houston on ESPNU. Be sure to keep it locked at auburnundercover.com. Thank you so much to AU Club, as usual, for sponsoring Thursday Night Live. For Jason Caldwell, I'm Nathan King. We will catch you guys next week, and thanks so much for joining us.